Although Apocalypse is today cozying up to the X-Men in Marvel's vaunted new Dawn of X relaunch, to the general public, he'll always be a villain. That's mainly down to the fact that Apocalypse is one of the most powerful mutants in existence, what with the character having been boosted by celestial technology. But it's also down to his ludicrously successful track record of turning allies into enemies, which he does by recruiting them to his sinister cabal, fittingly titled the Horsemen of Apocalypse. No less than 15 heroes and villains have been transformed into Apocalypse's servants in the 3 decades since his debut in X Factor number 5, and if the foreshadowing going on in House of X and Powers of 10 is anything to go by, more could be on the way. I'm Ewan, this is What Culture Comics, and here's what happened to everyone who became Horsemen of Apocalypse. Number 15. Archangel. The first and obviously most famous mutant to be turned into one of Apocalypse's lackeys, Warren Worthington III is probably more recognizable today by his title as Archangel than for his original one. Worthington finds his way to Apocalypse by way of the Mutant Massacre. Several mutants were badly wounded in the conflict, but none more so than Angel. He had his wings clipped by the Marauders, and Apocalypse, already assembling a new group of horsemen to make his first move, saw an opportune moment to strike. Coming to Angel's rescue after his plane explodes, Apocalypse promises Warren his wings back so long as he pledges allegiance as his new death. Despondent, Angel agrees, and after genetically altering him to the point his skin turns blue, and it's here where the character's modern self was finally realized. Warren would eventually shake Apocalypse's control, and as time went on, he'd regrow his original feathered wings. Number 14. Caliban. Like Warren, Caliban was serving with X Factor by the time Apocalypse came around. When he saw what he did to Angel, he begged Apocalypse for the same treatment, determined to seek revenge against those who had wronged the Morlocks during the earlier massacre. From there, he became a Hellhound, but after Archangel broke Apocalypse's control, he then also assumed the title of Death. For a while, actually, Caliban is able to shake Apocalypse's control. He joins up with X-Force, but is then plucked away by En-Saburneur once more, where he is then bestowed the title of Pestilence. This time around, Apocalypse alters his powers even further, granting him the ability to spread disease telepathically. Caliban actually gets released by Apocalypse in the end, and goes on to live the rest of his life helping the X-Men, passing away during the events of Messiah Complex. Number 13. Hulk. Given the sheer power and brute strength the Hulk already possesses in his normal form, you'd probably think turning him into a horseman would be a little bit overkill. Only that's exactly what happened to Hulk during the terrifying decade comics fans like to call the 90s. In The Incredible Hulk number 456, Bruce Banner's alter ego is targeted by Apocalypse after the Rage Monster fights with the X-Men. From there, Hulk becomes the latest version of War, and even battles the Juggernaut in a show of strength. The battle absolutely decimates Cairo, as well as the absorbing man who tries to intervene, and Hulk even nearly ends up killing Rick Jones before he realizes what's happening. Seemingly disgusted, he tears his new armor off and flees the scene, embarking on a continued cycle of rampage, destruction, death, and resurrection. Number 12. Ahab. A few years after Apocalypse's run-in with the Hulk, he decided to assemble a new group of Horsemen. This occurred during the 12, an event that hit the X-Men in 2000 that revolved around a possible future where Apocalypse was the ruler. In a bid to make this future a reality, Apocalypse started recruiting new mutants to be his Horsemen. One such figure involved was Ahab, an evil scientist from the future who debuted in the pages of Fantastic Four and who ended up being more machine than man by the time he crossed paths with En-Saburneur. A mutant hunter in the future, Dr. Rory Campbell was determined to prevent such a reality from ever coming to pass. Try as he might, Apocalypse selected him to be the new Famine, and helped the Tyrant capture the 12 mutants that would supposedly usher in his own eponymous age, only to be sent to a different dimension by Rasputin shortly thereafter. Number 11. Deathbird. Another Horseman of Apocalypse who joined his ranks during the events of the 12, Deathbird already had a history of being a nasty piece of work long before that comic came to pass. A member of the Shi'ar Empire, Deathbird was the treacherous sister of Empress Lilandra, and was repeatedly foiled in her attempts to usurp the throne by the Imperial Guard, the X-Men, and occasionally even the Starjammers. She was involved in a brief romance with Bishop, but she betrays him to the Skrulls, who are themselves aligned with En-Saburneur. Deathbird is then betrayed by Apocalypse in turn, and is transformed into the new war. Deathbird ultimately flees once Apocalypse is defeated though, and eventually even marries the third Summers brother, Gabriel. Number 10. Wolverine. Fatal Attractions is a fairly infamous storyline that saw Logan have his metal skeleton ripped from his body by an apoplectic Magneto, and for a time, he actually got by using just his bone claws. Obviously, anyone's going to opt for a metal skeleton over just a boring bony one if they're given the opportunity though, and it was here where Apocalypse came in. Sabanur kidnapped the Knucklehead, brainwashed him, and managed to successfully regraft the adamantium to Logan's skeleton, at which point he became the latest version of Death. To cover for Logan's whereabouts, Apocalypse actually placed a Skrull imposter with the X-Men. It doesn't last for long though, as Wolvie actually kills his doppelganger and breaks free of Apocalypse's control. Number 9. Gazer. If this list has illustrated anything so far, it's that you can't keep a good Apocalypse down. And so, after being repeatedly stymied in his attempts to take over the Earth, he returned once again following the events of M-Day. Naturally, this meant a new group of Horsemen accompanied the old tyrant once more, with the first being Gazer, who became the new war. This wasn't a particularly pleasant experience for the mutant, who ended up having his skeleton mangled in order to accommodate his new job title. Compounding this tragedy even further was the fact the character was then killed by Ozymandias while protecting Apocalypse. Number 8. Sunfire. Sunfire had lost his powers during the events of M-Day, and, just as Apocalypse did with Angel and Wolverine, promised to restore them if he accepted a role as a new Horseman. Shiro agreed, but quickly had second thoughts the moment he saw what effect the treatment had on Gazer. It was Gazer who recaptured Sunfire after he tried to escape though, at which point Shiro is then forcefully transformed into Famine. Fortunately, after some mental tinkering from Emma Frost, Sunfire returns back to normal and fights off an attack from Gazer. He later joins the Uncanny Avengers, but he's yet to make an appearance in the new Dawn of X reboot. Number 7. Polaris. While Sunfire initially agreed to join Apocalypse in this particular incarnation of the Horsemen, Polaris was reluctant from the start. She had lost her powers during the events of M-Day, and Apocalypse had started to transform her into Pestilence against her will. The entire process is pretty grim, as we see Apocalypse forcefully imbue Lorna with diseases and viruses in order for her to fulfill her new role. And once the process is complete, Polaris unleashes her new powers on the X-Men. Like the others, Lorna breaks free of Apocalypse's control but remains despondent, quitting the X-Men before embarking on a series of cosmic adventures for the next few years. Number 6. Gambit. Gambit has been through a whole lot during his years on the X-Men, and everything just seemed to take its toll by the time House of M came around. Mystique had tried to get him to cheat on her own daughter with her. She even shapeshifted into Rogue, if you want a tease of how wild the X-Men's version of the Graduate actually was, and it gave the impression that he was on the brink of collapse. Only, that's what Remy wanted everyone to think. He joined up with Apocalypse in a bid to betray him and save the X-Men, but clearly forgot about the part where the villain brainwashes his Horsemen once they're recruited. From there, Gambit became Death, and very nearly ended up killing Rogue in the process. Eventually, the character shook his brainwashing and reverted back to normal upon joining up with the Marauders. Number 5. PSYLOKKE. Rick Remender's Uncanny X-Force series was an absolute treat to read, and one of the main reasons why was how it dealt with Apocalypse. With Sabanur having been reincarnated in the body of a child, it falls to the X-Men's Black Ops counterpart to track down and kill the child before he can usher in a new age of terror. At this time, Betsy Braddock was in a romance with Warren, who was still suppressing the Dark Angel persona within him. After X-Force murder the child Apocalypse, they come up against the Shadow King, who frees the Dark Angel persona within Warren. Angel then subsequently turns PSYLOKKE into Death, after which Jean Grey turns Betsy back to normal. Number 4. Banshee. For all that Uncanny lacked in its overall grasp of the mutant metaphor, it more than made up for it in cosmic conflict. In this case, the Apocalypse twins are responsible for the new Horsemen, as they use death seeds to resurrect deceased figures from the Avengers and X-Men's respective pasts. Among the new 4 who were revived was the original Banshee, who was sent to kill Havoc, the brother of the man who murdered him, Vulcan. Following the events of the storyline, Banshee is taken to the Avengers mansion to recover. He's later seen on Krakoa during House of X, his time as a Horseman seemingly behind him. Number 3. Daken. Poor Wolverine. As if having to kill your own son wasn't bad enough, you then have to fight him all over again after he's been revived and given new cosmic powers as the latest to assume Death's mantle. Just as Banshee was sent to target someone of personal significance to him, so too was Daken compelled to seek out Wolverine. The two battle, but after the Avengers defeat the twins, Daken escapes with another of the Horsemen and decides to carve out a new life away from Apocalypse's legacy. Daken spends the next few years obsessing over his father, who had since passed away. Upon his return though, he resolves to hunt him down yet again, which results in his death at the hands of Lord Darkwind. He's later resurrected, but for now, no one really knows what Daken's up to. Number 2. Sentry. Categorically one of those names you'd least expect to have ever become a Horseman of Apocalypse, Sentry was resurrected along with Banshee and Daken when the Apocalypse twins fought off against the Avengers Unity Squad. Having been killed by Thor a few years earlier, Sentry was sent to track down the Odinson and do battle. He briefly succeeds in capturing the God of Thunder, until the Wasp is able to intervene and save him from Sentry's clutches. Like the aforementioned pair, following the defeat of the Apocalypse twins, Sentry breaks free of their control and goes his own way, later taking the Celestial Executioner deep into space. And number 1, the Grim Reaper. The last of the 4 to take up arms as the Apocalypse twins' Horseman of Death was the Grim Reaper, who had only recently been killed by Rogue a few issues earlier. If you thought that getting killed would instill some sense of caution in Reaper, then you'd be wrong. Following his transformation into a Horseman of Death, he turns his attention to the Vision. He targets the android's family, severely injuring his daughter in the process, but is then killed by his wife Virginia, who then buries his body in their picturesque suburban home. Although one would have hoped Reaper would stay that way, he was revived by Doctor Strange during the events of Damnation. Who knows where he'll strike next? And that was our list. Find more lists and articles like this on whatculture.com/comics, more of me on Twitter @YouRunesThings, and more stories like this within the walls of your favorite comic book store. For now though, have a great day and I'll see you next time. Bye!